The average person gets about 4,000 weeks in a lifetime. If you're over 35, chances are you've already used up about half of them. Now, I'm not sharing that to alarm you. After helping hundreds of people plan for retirement, I've simply noticed a pattern. Most folks end up working longer than they really need to, often without even realizing it. There are 8 clear signs that you might be able to step away from work far earlier than you think. In this video, I'll walk you through each of those signs. I'll also share one retirement option that almost no one talks about, but that could make a big difference for you. Before we get into that, there's something important I want you to keep in mind. Many people think of retirement as a kind of piggy bank, somewhere to stash money for a rainy day. My daughter painted ours, she's 6, and made it very clear she expects me to return every penny I borrow. Kids, right? But here's the thing, people get so focused on saving money that they end up putting off time with friends, family, and the kind of life they really want. They keep working until they hit some magical number that often doesn't reflect what they truly need. So instead of picturing retirement like a piggy bank, think of it like a scale. On one side, you've got money. On the other, you've got lifestyle. The goal isn't to pile up as much money as possible, it's to strike a healthy balance between the two. Sign number 1. If you've read The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, excellent read, by the way, you may remember a story that illustrates this perfectly. It's about 2 men. One was a Harvard graduate working as a high-level executive at Merrill Lynch, making a fortune. The other was a janitor earning minimum wage. You can probably guess which one made more money during his career. But here's the twist, the executive ended up bankrupt, while the janitor, who lived modestly and invested wisely, passed away with $8 million in savings. Now, I'm not suggesting you trade in your career to become a janitor. But the lesson here is powerful. It's not just about how much you earn, but what you do with it. If you're living below your means and have built a solid nest egg, you might already be much closer to retirement than you think. The first step? Know your numbers. I always encourage my clients to take a close look at their spending, not just to figure out what their lifestyle costs, but to see whether their spending aligns with what really matters to them. Sign number 2. A lot of folks focus intently on their investment portfolios and pensions, and that's understandable. But there's something even more important that many people overlook, and it's actually the first thing I check when someone asks if they're ready to retire early. That one thing? Whether or not they've paid off their mortgage. Think about it. Your mortgage is probably your biggest monthly bill. Once it's gone, your cost of living drops dramatically. And when your expenses go down, the amount you need to retire comfortably does too. So, if your home is already paid off, that's a major sign you may be ready to retire sooner than you thought. On the other hand, if you've still got 15 years left on your mortgage but are hoping to retire in 10, that could pose a problem. It's worth reviewing how your mortgage payments line up with your retirement timeline. Sign number 3. Quick question for you. At what age can you legally start accessing your pension? A. 43. B. 55. C. 65. D. 67. Most people, about 90%, answer C or D. But that's actually one of the biggest myths out there in retirement planning. Here's the truth, if your investments are structured correctly, you can begin drawing from your retirement funds as early as age 55. Soon, that age will move up to 57, but it's still well ahead of what most people think. Even earlier, if you've made smart use of wrappers like stocks and shares ISAs. So if you're financially stable and already have access to your retirement funds, that's yet another strong sign you might be ready to retire earlier than you think. Personally, I always recommend that my clients use a combination of pension accounts and ISAs to build their retirement wealth. That way, they have both flexibility and tax-efficient options, giving them more control to retire on their terms, not someone else's. Sign number 4. Last year, I sat down with a client named Bertie. He had nearly everything we've talked about so far. His mortgage was paid off, he lived simply, and he had full access to his pension savings. But there was one big issue. Almost all of his investments were tied up in individual company stocks, ones he had chosen based on online tips and forums. When the markets dipped right as he was preparing to retire, those investments took a major hit. Not only did Bertie start losing sleep, but his retirement date had to be pushed further and further out. And this is important. The people who retire early successfully are not always the ones with the biggest portfolios. They're the ones whose money is working smart, through diversification, well-structured portfolios, and income sources that don't all depend on one thing going right. If you have multiple streams of income, maybe rental property, a defined benefit pension kicking in down the line, or even a side business you enjoy, that's a huge advantage. Combined with tax-efficient accounts like pensions and ISAs, it can make early retirement not just possible, but sustainable. And more importantly, it lets you sleep soundly at night. So, if you followed along and checked these boxes, your mortgage is paid off, you know your monthly spending, you have access to retirement savings, your income streams are diverse, and your investments are solid financially, you may already be ready to retire. But here's the thing, money is only half the equation. You could have all the savings in the world and still end up deeply unhappy in retirement if your mind and heart aren't in the right place for it. Let's imagine for a moment that you've nodded along to all the financial signs. How do you know if personally you're ready? Here's where we turn inward. I'm going to ask you a few questions. If you find yourself unsure of the answers, don't worry. You can click the link in the description to set up a free call with me. We'll talk it through and figure out whether or not you're ready to take that next step. Sign number 5. Are you in good health? Are you still active and energetic? Do you have a long list of things you still want to do, places to travel, people to visit, experiences to savor? Maybe there's family overseas you haven't seen in years, and you've always promised yourself you'd make the trip someday. If you answered yes to these questions, that's a powerful sign it might be time to consider retiring now. This may sound like I'm simplifying things, but let me put it into perspective. Most people retire at 65. By 70, their health starts to decline. And the last decade of life? Often filled with managing doctor's visits instead of knocking things off a bucket list. Now flip that timeline. Retire at 45 or 50, and you give yourself 20 years of good health, energy, and freedom. Time to see the world. Time to launch that dream business. Time to run and play with your kids or grandkids. Don't overlook this sign. Because unlike money, your health and energy are not resources you can earn back later. Sign number 6. Let me ask, how do you feel about your job? A. You love it. B. It's fine. C. You dread it and count every second until 5:01. If you're like many folks I meet, you probably fall somewhere between B and C. And according to YouGov polls, that's true for a large portion of people. But here's what I see again and again, folks who stay in jobs they don't enjoy because they haven't hit that imaginary retirement number. They keep pushing through, day after day, not realizing that they might already have enough. That magic number we talked about earlier. Now, I'm not saying you should pack it in just because you've had a bad day, or even a rough week. We've all been there. But if you've been feeling this way for a year or more, and that feeling doesn't go away after a vacation, a long weekend, or even after switching teams or roles, it might be time to think seriously about retirement. Or at the very least, about making a meaningful change. That said, this only really works if you can also check off sign number 7. Let me ask you, do you fall into category A or category B? Category A, you like the idea of retirement, but you're not quite sure what it would look like. Maybe golf sounds good, and you'd love to take a trip somewhere. But you're not certain where you'd go or how you'd fill your days. You enjoy your job most of the time, just not lately. Or category B, you've already been picturing your what-if life. You've got a clear plan. You know exactly what you'd do, where you'd go, and how you'd spend your time. Maybe it's that woodworking project in the garage, that long road trip across the country, or just more time with the grandkids. You can see it. And it excites you. If you're in category A, I want to gently caution you. A few years ago, I worked with a client who retired without a clear vision of what came next. He was just tired of the rat race, tired of the commute, and ready to be done. But once the dust settled, he found himself without much purpose. The structure was gone. The motivation was gone. And before long, his energy seemed to fade, almost overnight. He aged quickly, fell into a depression, and spent his days mostly waiting. What that taught me, and what I now share with all my clients, is that even if you can afford to retire, you also need something to retire for. On the other hand, if you're in Category B and already know the adventures waiting for you, if you've got projects, passions, and plans that bring you joy and keep your mind and body moving, then that's one more powerful sign you might be truly ready. And that brings us to sign number 8. Take a moment and ask yourself, why are you watching this video? Let's be honest, it's probably not just to look at my face for radio. You're watching because something inside you is already wondering about the next chapter. Maybe you click because you know you're ready. Or maybe you're still deciding. But either way, you're asking the question, and that matters. That's often the first real sign that you're closer than you think. And here's something I want to tell you that might make that leap feel a little less daunting. There's a big myth about early retirement. People think it has to be all or nothing. You're either clocking in full-time or you've walked off into the sunset for good. But that's simply not true. There's a middle ground, a sweet spot called semi-retirement, and I wish more people knew about it. Could you cut back to 2 or 3 days a week? Could you take on only the projects that really light you up? Could you shift to half-days or seasonal work? The beauty of this approach is that it gives you a chance to ease into retired life. You don't lose your entire income overnight. And sometimes, dipping a toe into retirement helps people realize they actually enjoy their work again when it's on their terms. You also get a chance to see what retired life is really like. Because, believe it or not, playing golf 5 times a week might end up being more boring than you thought. Having a balanced and thoughtful view of retirement is essential. But none of it matters if the foundation, the numbers themselves, aren't right. So, check out the next video where I break down exactly how much money you need to retire in 2025. Or, if you're ready to talk it through with someone who's helped others do exactly this, you can click the link in the description and apply for one of the free calls with me. We'll look at your situation together and help you figure out, once and for all, if this is your time.